with apologies to the 1952 Bing Crosby, Bob Hope, and Dorothy Lamour movie. Back in 1970, I had my own road to Bali. Back when I was a high school Peace Corps volunteer, the hot season would come and it would be so hot and I'd be sweating like a dog. I'd get back to the teacher's room, put my head on the desk, and not wake up until my next class. So I was overjoyed when it was time for the end of term and we had a break. I had saved a little money and I was going to take a trip. I was going to go on the road to Bali. The first leg of my journey was the overnight train to Bangkok. There I had to take a Peace Corps annual physical and I passed it okay. So now I had to get down south. My plan was to go through the south and then get to Malaysia, through Malaysia to Singapore, over to Jakarta, and overland through Yogyakarta and then to Bali. Now that didn't work out. So the next leg of the journey was to get to Hat Yai, way down south. The only thing I could get was a third class, not a sleeper, but a third class regular train. In third class, they had benches, basically. They were made of wood. The picture shows you it's much nicer than the one we took. The benches were wood, and it sat three of us on one side and facing three other people on the other side. The three people we were facing were three soldiers, and for the first 4 or 5 hours, they were having a grand old time drinking whiskey and partying. Somewhere about the fourth or fifth hour, the guy in the middle vomited right in between all 6 of us. And that thing stayed on the floor for the next 20 hours. So we survived 20 hours, or the whole trip was 24 hours. And we arrived in Hat Yai. I got myself a really cheap hotel. That's the only thing I could afford. And had a good night's sleep, at least. Now I had to get a minibus and take that to Penang. Now, Penang at that time was a Chinese city. It was almost completely Chinese. It's in Malaysia. A ferry ride from the border in Thailand. And it was a great city. It wasn't built up. It looked just like Chinese movie. And we had a lot of good food there. Now I had to get to Kuala Lumpur. From Penang to Kuala Lumpur is quite a trip. And I didn't have much money, so I decided I was going to try to hitchhike. And in fact, it worked. I got in the back of an old truck, and he took us all the way to Kuala Lumpur. Now, Kuala Lumpur wasn't like it is today. Kuala Lumpur now looks like Chicago in places. It's got some of the tallest buildings in the world, and it's got a tower that's at least twice as high as the Seattle Space Needle, where I came from. But when I first went there, the tallest building in the city was the railway station. After spending a few days in KL, it was time for me to figure out a way to get to Singapore. That's when I discovered an event that will live in infamy. Well, at least where world travelers are concerned. Singapore had decided to not let anybody with long hair into their country. Now, this was the time of hippie world travelers, and a lot of people had long hair. My hair wasn't that long, but when I looked at the pictures of who they were stopping, I wouldn't make it. What they did was, if you went to the border and tried to enter the country, they measured your hair, and if it was too long, they would bring you over to a barber and chop your hair off. I didn't think that was for me. So I decided, well, maybe I'll have to skip Singapore and go right to Jakarta. I did find a cheap airfare to get to Jakarta. Flew in. I got in very, very early. And according to the Lonely Planet guide, there was a place in Jakarta where I could stay very cheaply. It wasn't open yet because it was about 6 o'clock in the morning. So there was a little bench in front. So I sat down on the bench and there was a Jakarta newspaper. I picked it up and started reading it. When all of a sudden I heard a very strange sound I'd never heard before. It was like a honking sound, honk, 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 like that. I let the paper down, and in front of me, maybe about less than a foot in front of my face, was a woman without a nose. And she was honking at me, and then she started waving her fingers at me, and they were just stumps. And this woman was suffering from leprosy untreated. I was absolutely shocked, and I just reached in and I got some money. I have no idea how many rupees it was that I exchanged at the airport. I gave her a chunk, and I got up and I took a long walk. After that experience, I thought it was time to leave Jakarta. At that time, it was a huge, huge city, and today it's even bigger. But I got a plane ride to, I was going to skip going overland, going to Yogyakarta, which I'm sad to say I've never visited. But I flew directly into Denpasar on Bali. As an aside, of the 4 dozen or so countries I've visited in my travels, I never made it to Singapore or Yogyakarta. It's an unintended consequence of the experiences I had. Kind of bummed out about that.